I have some questions prepared, but we definitely want questions from the audience. If we can bring the QR code back up on the screen, that'd be great. Basically, like everything is fair game here. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully some big questions, specifically around Lido Core. So whether it is the curated module, the simple DVT module, the community staking module, whatever you are curious to learn more about, please feel free to ask. Izzy, Dima, and Sasha will be very excited to answer. I'll just start with one of my own, but CSM has been live now for a bit over a year. The simple DVT module for a couple of years. We're talking a lot about changes to the curated module. How do you guys think about the like end state of Lido in terms of the mix between permissioned and permissionless stakers? Like, what are the pros and cons behind those things? Yeah.
That's a definite question to Izzy.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'll take this one. Okay, the only thing that I would add here also, especially since we're talking about V3 a lot today, and hopefully we're looking at a release sometime around mid to late December, is that V3 is also permissionless. So when we're thinking about the permissionless composition of the Lido protocol, we should take into account that there's like Lido Core and this new annex to the protocol that will be built through the use of SD vaults. I imagine that a really robust protocol probably ends up with something like a 70-30 or 60-40 split between permissioned and permissionless stake, where the permissionless kind of like ebbs and flows depending on how much supply there is in the market and from like a node operator perspective, and the financial viability and sustainability of being able to run nodes in a permissionless manner. I think having this balance is something that allows for protocols to scale to the sizes that like mass retail and institutions, et cetera, require. And it also allows for the right amount of balance of security from the perspective of how much reliance do you have on trusted node operators where reputation is kind of like the primary bulwark against possible risk, and the permissionless side of things that is perhaps less economically optimal, but more optimal from safeguarding the security of the protocol perspective. And of course, just in terms of like what's best for the network. In general, I think that permissionlessness is a really, really important part of decentralization, but I think often we conflate something being permissionless with something being decentralized. Permissionless systems very often end up being not decentralized because they, like power law takes over, and the constituent framework of the parties that underlie the systems, and it ends up being quite centralized and thus non-distributed. So I think what has made Lido successful is really about this kind of like pragmatic idealism. How do you figure out what is a product that works at a mass scale that still maintains the values and the ideology of the network, and how do you constantly progress that to get better and better over time?
Yeah. So I have first of all, I fully agree with Izzy and what he said. I really want to
only because you have to, right?
No. If I'm not, I'm not. The one thing that I want to put a special emphasis here is that, again, permissionless doesn't mean decentralized. So people frequently ask us, what's going to be the target share of CSM, say, in 2026, in 2027? Are you guys going to scale CSM to 50% of the protocol? Well, this is the wrong question to be asked. The right question to be asked is what's going to be the distribution of stake in between operators? So, for example, we have a few of our professional operators from curated module also represented in CSM, which does it, like if we will have CSM at 50%, say, and 40% of CSM, or like 90% of CSM, will be the same big professional operators that are represented in the curated set, that wouldn't make much of a sense. So that's why the right question here is how to achieve the best distribution of stake in between node operators, in between staking primitives like staking vaults, Lido Core, or whatever else we will, I don't know, invent soon. The distribution between technologies, like are node operators using DVT or not? Which technology are they using? What is the balance between them? What is client diversity, and so on and so forth. So all of the efforts, even though at the surface it might look simple, like, oh, just raise permissionless share and that's pretty much it, you guys done. It is not it. It's way more complicated. And this is the reason why CSM share has been raising very, very gradually. This is why all of the transitions in the curated module will be gradual. It's just because of the fact that finding this perfect balance is not that obvious as it might seem. So end goal of Lido validator set is to have it as decentralized as possible. And that's what we are doing, and that's what we are spending our days at.
Yeah, I just want to double down on the point that Dima mentioned about like professional node operators being able to join CSM. And this is like one of the biggest challenges that we face every time we are about to design something new, because apart from like visible competition that we have like on the market, so Lido versus somebody else, we also need to like strike balance between the modules and now vaults like conditions and terms, because these products are also compete between each other internally. And yeah, this comes back to the initial question, how we strike the balance between like permissionless and permissioned. And we always need to keep in mind that permissionless does not mean that there are no professionals there and they really bring value to decentralization.
Nice. Thank you for the questions. Keep them coming. This is like a question that really just has kind of been answered, but maybe just to put a fine point on it. So are node operators allowed to operate in different modules of Lido at the same time?
Yes.
Perfect. Cool.
It's like basically encouraged. And I would say it's encouraged in the sense that like we don't want CSM to be full of professional node operators, but it's important for node operators to have like be part of the modules in the sense that like the modules are made up of different sets of values or presets. So in the curated module, what's at stake is mostly like your reputation and future earnings. In the CSM module, what's at stake is like the bond.
Stake.
Sorry.
Stake is at
yeah,
stake.
stake is at stake. Well, their stake, but also like, can you outcompete, me running my validator in my basement? Probably not. So that's also fun.
Yeah, that's a good thing, because there has been a perception that home stakers equals bad performance. But this is absolutely not true. And I tried it myself, and I'm not trying to say that, oh, I'm super good at running nodes. No, I'm bad at running nodes. Again, I do have like frequent power outages or stuff like that. I do spill water on my coffee machine, so the power goes down in the home. And even with that said, over the last 30 days, performance of the majority of CSM operators, specifically home stakers running their validators from home, is above network average, which is crazy, because people who run validators at home, they are really into it. They are trying to optimize their performance to do sort of a tweaks or whatever else. And yeah, that's going to be a great challenge to outcompete Izzy. The other thing to add about node operator participation in between modules, right now there is no connection between stake allocation in the curated set and the number of validators one or the other professional operator is running in CSM or in simple DVT or in any other module. Well, in the end game scenario, by closer to the end of 2026 or maybe 2027, this situation will change. So we're making protocol and the distribution over the protocol way smarter than it was. So just keep in mind that whenever you decide to flood CSM and leave no space for community stakers, well, at the end of the day, this will be accounted for in your total distribution. Because as I mentioned, what matters is total allocation of stake. Doesn't matter in which module the stake is. But node operators, yes, they are allowed to run validators, whatever.
It's meant to be a one-word answer, right?
It's usually like that.
It was still good. All right, following Sasha's presentation, there's a couple questions on curated module V2 bonds. So Sasha, this will be for you. But can you explain the bond part a bit more? You said there's a per operator bond, not per validator, but operators also have the option to lock a bigger bond and receive extra allocation. So can you unpack the base allocation and the bond size per operator, and then what that extra component actually means?
Yeah, sure. So let's start with the first part, where we talk about like necessary amount of bond that each node operator needs to provide. So I mentioned that that bond sits at a node operator level, not per key, though when you like the more keys you have, the more bond you need to supply, because the bond will be calculated per key, but essentially it will be sitting on an operator level. And why is it done? So for example, if we see that a certain portion of rewards, execution layer rewards, were sent to a wrong address, not to a Lido address, that we consider as like MEV stealing or EL reward stealing. And this amount can be way bigger than a bond that sits just under this single key that committed this violation, right? And why I said that it sits at a node operator level, because when it is designed like this, we are able as a protocol to take back the bigger amount of bond that corresponds just to one single key. All right. Yeah. In terms of the amount of bond, the research that we've done on this matter is coming like pretty soon, I guess in coming weeks. I'm not sure if we want to mention like the ranges. Yeah, so I would say that like our current consideration is that for the amount of bond that each professional node operator runs in the curated module right now, the amount of bond will not exceed like 100 ETH. So this is like a rough I would say, range, a number that we have in mind based on the research that we've done about like the slashing risks, especially how this slashing risk differs from like before Pectra and after Pectra. Yes, that's about the first part. And about the second part, yes, node operators on top of the required amount of bond that requires for each key, node operators will be able to provide additional bonds that will serve as a like booster for their stake allocation weight. So the more stake you provide, the more bonds you provide, the bigger your stake allocation as a node operator can be, compared to node operators who are like similar to yours, but they didn't provide this additional bond. So there is some part that is necessary, and there is some part that is voluntary that aims to boost your stake allocation weight.
Cool. Thank you. All right, the next one. In curated module v2, will a strike detection mechanism take into account downtime due to restart of validator and validators and doppelganger protection, which is about 15 minutes? That's like a normal part of operations. Do strikes consider that?
Yeah, so again, as I mentioned, strikes has like a pretty good design by far. We were thinking of the cases that we do not want to penalize professional node operators for like small downtimes. And for this reason, we will have this performance leeway, same as you saw in the picture in Dima's presentation, when we, for each node operator type, we defined like a certain level. And if a node operator on average falls below this threshold, then we consider bad performance, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we are again penalizing. We're issuing strikes, and as many strikes, like the more strikes you have, the smaller your stake allocation will be. But for like really small outages, it won't be issued. No, it will be like for like considerable downtime.
The other thing worth mentioning about strikes in the curated module version 2 is that they will be much broader than in CSM. So in CSM, the only way how your validator can get strike is by being below the threshold within a frame. In curated module, first of all, again, as Sasha mentioned, node operator strikes are on the node operator level and not on the validator level. And any other violations, like, for example, misconfigured fee recipient or whatever else, there would be a full list of possible violations, would result in a certain amount of strikes. Though the effect of strikes, again, would be different. In CSM, you collect 3 strikes and your validator gets ejected. In the curated module, and Sasha probably made a small mistake when she was describing that, the more strikes you have, the lower your stake allocation. So it's not tied to rewards. Strikes will never touch your rewards. But what it would affect is if you're like a pesky bad operator and you have a reasonable amount, like meaningful amount of strikes, I would say, it means that at the next, for example, round of validator exit requests, your node operator is likely to get this exits. And on the next reward distribution, your operator is less likely to get distributions. So this is to be taken into account. And again, nothing to worry about here. So if you're doing your job well, you will have no strikes, same way as in CSM, though the system itself and the consequences are different.
All right, one for Izzy. So there are many Ethereum ETFs and digital asset treasuries coming to market now. Is Lido positioned to provide any of the staking infrastructure for these kind of products?
So this one is actually pretty easy from like the actual question. Are we positioned to do so? Yes, absolutely. So there's some stuff that I can talk about and some stuff that I can't talk about yet, but should be able to talk about soon. What I would say is that we have received interest in in advanced discussions with issuers across the globe, specifically in Europe and the United States. And in the case of the United States, there has already been a filing with the SEC, so-called S1, by VanEck for an ETF that would basically be composed 100% entirely of STETH as the underlying product. So the cool thing that Lido essentially offers to these issuers is the ability to offer products that cannot necessarily be matched by products that employ native staking. So a product that is underlied 100% by STETH can essentially receive rewards all of the time, and you don't have to worry about changing the amount of the product that is staked versus unstaked with regard to like how long the queue is and all of those different things. It does add different considerations with regards to like what is exactly the redemption flow if the recipient cannot or does not want to accept STETH in kind. But those considerations are usually pretty easy to fix from like a business perspective and a commercials perspective. And the other cool thing about STETH is that it can be used to supplement products that employ native staking. So a product might be like 60% natively staked, and then another 20 to 25% on top of that is using STETH, either to supplement the redemption request with STETH or just to achieve like a higher stake rate.
Thank you. For Dima, so home stakers have high network latency in South America. How do you think that they can improve their performance and tie that into CSM?
Okay, that's a great question. I genuinely not sure how home stakers can improve their latency in South America, though CSM Performance Oracle is designed in a way that unless your latency is so bad that you are missing attestations, unless you're missing blocks or whatever. So if you're still in time most of the time, you will be above the threshold, even though like some of your attestations might not yield the highest possible reward, which you can get if all of 3 fields of the attestation are correct and you submit the attestation right after the block you should attest. Like even if there is a delay and you're like lagging, I don't know, like 1 or 2 blocks behind, well, on Raver.network, you will have not great performance. But for CSM Performance Oracle, that would still be fine and okay, specifically because we want to account for the fact that home stakers might face such an issue. So in CSM shouldn't be a big problem. But in general, if you feel like your home connection, for example, is super unstable, the usual advice is to try other ISPs, to try not to work with like 3rd or 4th layer ISPs. So basically get yourself a big name ISP if you have it in your country, give it a try. And in the like very last case scenario, I think that RLA is still a more or less feasible thing. At least Iridian is running his DBT node in Kenya using Starlink. This option might be on expensive side, I do agree, but at the same time, if you have your country house, I don't know, somewhere in Columbia Mountains, and you really want to run Validator from home, well, my best advice, go get yourself Starlink.
Perfect. For Sasha, would it be possible to add being an engineer on a curated set operator team as proof of experience for CSM ICS?
So is the experience of being a node operator in the curated set qualifies as ICS in CSM?
For a specific person working on one of the teams.
Only if they're running those nodes from home.
Yeah, but like there is and we have this like quite a lot of these examples of people who are part of a professional node operators team running their ICS in CSM, which is even fine because ICS is initially designed in a way that even if you get ICS, all of your benefits are limited. So for example, you get an increased fee only for your first 16 keys. So for a professional node operator, it doesn't really make sense to try to like play with this, like try to sneak into CSM for getting bigger rewards, because for each ICS, the benefits are limited. And like in order to validate at scale in CSM with like beneficial parameters, you need to farm, I don't know, 200, 300 ICSs. So which is like a pretty tough. So answer is yes. You're welcome to be as an individual to validate in CSM and get ICS, but it doesn't really provide a lot of like opportunities for professional node operators to game the system, because it was designed this way. It was perfectly designed, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the question was kind of different. It's like, what's the practical answer? If you are an engineer working for a professional operator, how do you get ICS? And would it be enough to say, oh, I work for, I don't know, whatever, node operator? Well, on its own, no, there is no such categories. But you can easily get that by doing CSM testnet for 2 months. Not a big deal if you are already running validators, right? And after that, you can just reach out to one of us and say, hey, I want to get into ICS, so that we will add you to this circles group. And combined, you will have 5 points in proof of experience, and you will easily get ICS. But with no additional efforts, without running either solo or CSM validators, or participating in simple DVT, well, no, there would be no specific category for professional operator employees.
All right. I'm pretty sure I know who this question comes from. In the end game, operator risk through the amount of stake controlled across modules seems to be the main concern. Is it multi-operator DVT solving for that and allows for bigger shares per operator?
That's a good question. So yes and no. The one complication that you have to think about in terms of like DVT is how much additional risk is added through the DVT infrastructure itself. And that's like one additional thing to reason about. So there's a lot of different, I don't know, like layers, I guess, of risk for each of the different ways that validators may be run. Multi-operator DVT risk like drastically slashes, the risk of slashing, but it like may potentially increase infrastructure risk. So what we want to do, ideally, is balance the amount of different like DVT infrastructures that the protocol might have exposure to, and make sure that the stake that is run by a single operator is probably not all run with like the same piece of infrastructure as well. In those cases, so for example, if an operator might be using like multiple DVT protocols or is using non-DVT and DVT, then I would agree that yes, like in that case, an operator that is participating in inter-operator DVT can probably end up running a little bit more stake than they normally would if they were only just like running it and managing the infra completed by themselves. And this is already kind of baked into the considerations that we have around node operator types in curated module V2 and how inter-operator cluster node control, we have certain different weights in the allocation algorithm. And the great thing about these weights and the allocation algorithm in general is that it will be DAO defined. So the weights should basically be a combination of the reflection of the current environment of stake and the objectives that the network and the DAO have with regards to where they want to push Lido and the network towards. So what do I mean by that? If at the time of when we launched CMV2, DVT has a share of the network and a share of Lido that is below what we think is like the risk-adjusted ideal, we might give more weight to multi-operator DVT. If then it turns out that like everybody is running multi-operator DVT and it's only running on one piece of infrastructure, we may want to scale that back down.
Cool. Staying on the DVT topic, can you talk about how DVT users are incentivized to run validators both in CSM and potentially, like you touched on this, for curated module V2 as well?
Yeah. So there's basically two ways. There's like direct incentivization and then there's indirect incentivization. Let me start with the indirect first. So if you're running in a cluster with friends, and you're all poor, you probably can't run a solo validator. If you're running in a multi-DVT operator and you're all poor, then maybe you can get enough money together for the bond to run a validator. And like, okay, this is a little bit like flippant the way that I put it, but I think that's generally true. So sharing resources means that you can eventually come to a point where you're running way more stake than you would normally be able to do so normally. So it allows you to not only kind of like share the load and the burden of running the validator and feel comfortable that, you know, oh, I'm on holiday, you know, and my validator goes down. You don't need to jump on the next flight and fly home to fix it or to get like a strike from Dima. Your friends are going to be there and they'll be, well, hopefully not also on vacation with you and running their validator in the same desk drawer. Yeah, and basically you will help each other there. So those are the indirect benefits. The direct benefits come in the form of incentives that are usually provided by these DVT infrastructure protocols. So those incentives are allocated directly to the node operators. And the third way, once we have the weightings with the different node operator types, is perhaps a little bit of an extra stake weight allocation.
All right. What can Lido do to mitigate against the supermajority bug risk, possibly encouraging the curated module operators to run multi-client setups that need to agree in 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 voting models?
Yeah, so that basically. I think there's quite a few different discussions going on right now around like possible circuit breaker setups for node operators to run. It is easier for node operators to run them because they're usually running like multiple different types of clients. But the idea is that you will run a sufficient number of pairs of execution layer and consensus layer clients and have them always come to a consensus before you publish an attestation for a block. Another possibility of this is that you might publish the attestation, but the moment that one of them disagrees, it raises a flag and you go investigate why this flag has been raised and then shut off the validators if it looks like something is going wrong. And what this allows us to do is an invalid block might be proposed, and that's kind of like what led to the spiral in Holeshki. But if a sufficient amount of stake, so over 33%, I think ideally as an industry we'd like to target something like 40%, is running validators in a way that allows them to see this, then it'll allow them to turn off their machines fast enough such that that block will not justify. And if the block does not justify, then we don't get into the supermajority bug scenario where everybody who ended up on the wrong chain that was still the canonical chain getting slashed when they come back on.
Perfect. Okay, we have time for 2 quick ones. The first, I would like to start with Sasha, and you will all answer the same question. But what are you most excited about regarding Lido and the protocol, the DAO, in the next year?
Why am I to answer first? I'm passing this opportunity to Dima. I need to think it. No, I need to think. Am I excited? I am. Why? I don't know. For me, like personally, in terms of like my personal feelings, I'm super excited that now I got to work on the like biggest module that is about to become like more self-sustained, robust, so that we can free those resources and work on something that is going to be even more exciting for the DAO, for the protocol. I mean, that's a pretty tough question to ask like today. Have you seen the market? So yeah, that would be my answer, I guess.
Yeah, the beauty of staking is that no matter the market, you are always getting staking rewards. And specifically in case of Ethereum staking, when Ethereum price goes down, well, each time there is a massive discount, there's a portion of it that goes to Lido stakers. So go check APR. It has been filling well over the recent days. What I'm excited about is that in 2026, Lido is entering the end game state with ST Vaults going live this year, hopefully, with the updates to curated set, with extension of CSM, and with increasing the level of automation, which we internally usually call Bahamas-friendly protocol, should we ever all go to Bahamas, which would likely not happen, but anyway. all of that, like increasing level of automation and increasing the maturity of how the protocol on its own can reason about what is good stake allocation and what is not, is definitely the thing that makes me wake up in the middle of the night asking myself, have we done everything correct? Do we need to include something else into this formula? Do we need to have another like measure that should be accounted for? But at the end of the day, we will make it. And in 2026, Lido validator set will become even better. But now, thanks not just to human interventions, but to an automated mechanisms.
I actually was going to say something very similar to what Dima said. So Lido is, like 5.5 years old? No, 5 years old, basically in December. And it's been incredible to watch the journey of this DAO and this protocol in terms of starting off with a solution that was like a very clear product market fit. It's something that allowed you to get your staking rewards when withdrawals didn't even exist. Wow, who was actually staking back then? I mean, I was. That's so scary. And there was like a roadmap blog post, I think, that was written a little bit before I joined, or right around the time that I joined in May of 2021, which basically charted the course of what contributors at the time envisioned to be this decentralization journey of the protocol. And we're actually really, really close to solving almost all of the different things that we talked about back then. Dual governance, which went live earlier this year, is probably one of the most incredible and like novel features in large decentralized protocols on any blockchain, Ethereum or not. This idea that you can give users of the protocol an ability to delay or rage quit from undesirable upgrades. The decentralization of the protocol and the robustness and the permissionless elements have made incredible strides, both with CSM and now like the launch of SD Vaults. And this fine tuning essentially of the largest component of the protocol, the curated module, into being an almost self-regulating and self-healing mechanism that you give it like some targets and it kind of like continuously and iteratively works towards those targets rather than needing like a little bit more manual intervention, not to work in generally, but just from a fine-tuning perspective. I think like it's incredible to see all of this progress essentially come to fruition. And I think the second component of this is that while Lido has been growing and maturing, so has Ethereum and so has crypto adoption. So we're at a point in time where we're at the cusp of traditional finance and meshing quite fully with like crypto economic finance. And Lido as a protocol, and because it's a staking protocol as well, and on Ethereum, which is like probably the best place for traditional finance to transact, given its credible neutrality, is in a really, really unique position. And I think the fact that the protocol has lasted so long is testament to how serious it is, how professional it is, and how uniquely able it is to adapt to the demands and expectations of both sides, which is very, very rare. So I'm basically like happy to be around for a little bit longer and like watch the kid grow up and go off to college and, I don't know, live its life.
That's awesome.
I changed my mind. The most exciting thing in 2026 is LDO buybacks. I'm sorry.
Perfect. No, it's very similar to our last question, actually, which I would just say, thanks God someone asked this, because I've been wondering the same question I've been too afraid to ask for years. This was the first question we received, and it's if Sasha and Dima are married.
We are brother and sister.
That's not an answer to the question.
No, we are not.
He's my brother.
And with that, I think we can wrap up. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, folks.